I would love for you to touch a little bit on the educational theory of how you feel about the future of education and where it's going, and how young people today, um, and parents also, should be looking to the future and to how they can support and help young people today.
I'm going to start answering one question at a time and keep
Okay.
prompting me for the next one. So let me start with the last part that you mentioned. How do parents and children really think about education, right? And I think to some extent we have to realize that the time, or in the olden days where you could go to an education and learn the certain set of skills and you can use those skills for the rest of your life, those days are gone. Because as the technologies are becoming, growing exponentially, any skill that you learn becomes obsolete even by the time you graduate. So in some sense, the idea of learning skills is not what the education system should be about. It should be about learning to learn, learning to solve problems. And many of the problems tend to be multidisciplinary. So how do we really look at the problem at the core? How do you break down a problem and then find how to actually solve a complex problem? Because underlying all the complexities, there are really simple, basic, fundamental items that need to be solved. And if you start to take an approach that actually takes all complex problems and saying, what are the basic elements that need to be solved for this problem to be solved, you'll start to see that many of the elements already exist, and the elements don't exist is the one that you should focus on developing for the problem to be solved. And I'll give you a bunch of examples of that, right? So the first thing is that, as a parent, our job should never be, whether it's a teacher or a parent, is that to take the children to the water and make them drink, because that used to be the old theory. You bring them to class and you teach them things, and then you test them and hoping that at least they learn just enough to get a passing grade. And it doesn't matter whether you get an A or whether you get a D, and then you move on to the next thing, right? Rather than, if we look at the education similar to a video game that says it is not a fixed time variable learning, what if it is fixed learning variable time? So today in our education system, you get a semester or a trimester to learn something. Whether you learn a lot or you learn a little, as long as you get A or a D, you are actually move on to the next class. In a video game, until you master that level, whether it takes you 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months, or 3 years, you don't move to the next level until you master the first level. And that is what I call fixed learning variable time versus a fixed time variable learning. The second thing is that in terms of, as we look at the future of where the children are going to be contributing most to the society, it is all around new set of technologies that are coming up. That means we have to start thinking about how do we teach children to be intellectually curious, because until you develop that intellectual curiosity in a child, they actually never go back and become a lifelong learner. So, one of the things we did with our own children were actually started to teach them about the basic fundamental. What if it was possible? Imagine a world where this actually works. Now, what would that world look like? And tell me, if you were to think about creating that world, what would needs to happen for that world to exist, right? And you start to get them into a problem solving mode. And once you do that, suddenly they are intellectually curious about every single thing that's happening. Every time they see a problem, in their mind it goes, what if it could be solved? What if this problem doesn't exist? What would the humanity look like? And once you start to change your mindset that everything is solvable, there is very few things in the world that actually can't be solved, right? So it is simply a barrier to solving the problem is what we imagine, right? So it's the imagination is the only barrier to what we can actually solve. The day before any breakthrough, it's a crazy idea. And the day after the breakthrough, it's an obvious idea. So how do you achieve these breakthroughs? And the breakthroughs are simply about experimentation. That means we as children need to learn to experiment and see our ideas not work. And that to me is the key. Today, we are taught in the schools that there is only one right answer to every problem. Here is a problem, here are the multiple choice questions A, B, C, D. If you think that two of them may be right, you are wrong. There's only one right answer to every problem. Whereas in the real life, we all know there are many ways of solving the problem. So we are actually, as we are educating our children, we're taking the creativity away. And in fact, there are so many studies done that when the children, before they go to school, they are curious, they are imaginative, they are creative. And as they go through the school system, we fundamentally take away their creativity and you start to give them the knowledge. The point is, you are wasting your time. The knowledge is available on your fingertip, on your iPhone every single day. Every child can go out and find the facts of when the civil war happened, when this particular thing happened. You don't need to know the knowledge. You need to start thinking about how do you apply the learnings of that knowledge into solving that problem. Now, I can go on and on and on about how that education system that is designed as an assembly line, where you take the children and you say, just like an assembly line, all the children who are 12 years old go here, all the children who are 13 years old go here, and you go into this assembly line, and you go into this assembly line, and they take away that every single child is different. They learn differently, they think differently, they absorb the information differently. But we put them through assembly line. At the end of the day, we simply say pass, fail, and you actually go back. That, like a quality control, this one failed, this one succeeded, and you keep moving them along, right? And that system has to change. The world is going to be personalized, and it has to be customized to each individual. And I really believe in the online education, you can do all of that. The multiple ways of learning and multiple ways of solving the problem, all can be done. So, Christy, I'm going to stop there for a second and to see if you have any other question on any other topic before I continue here.
Um, I just think that it's, what you have to say is just absolutely incredible. And when you look at, for example, the future, or why the system is so slow to change, what do you think is the reasoning behind it? Because as we know, it's not necessarily, a lot of times you hear, oh, well, teachers are worried that they'll lose their job because of to computers or to a system. However, what it allows you to do is really differentiate that instruction. The teacher still needs to be there, but allows her or him to facilitate that learning. So what do you feel is the reasoning why there's so much pushback to not necessarily go with what's best for each student?
I think the lot of it is politics, and the lot of things that come in. What is easy for a parent? It's easy for them to say teaching is not my job, teaching is a school's job. So suddenly a parent washes their hands off and say, as far as learning is concerned, it happens at school. Whereas I personally believe the learning starts at home and ends at home. The parents are the best teacher, and they really have to be actively taking every moment and think of that as a learning moment. Every interaction is a way to teach the child a life lesson, right? And that those life lessons are beyond simply learning about math and chemistry and physics. It is about teaching them about the possibilities. Again, the second thing is, the parents themselves acting as an example of living the life that they are preaching. Because what happens is, many of us preach something to our children, and then we go out and do something different, and hoping that children listen to what we say, However, the children are a lot smarter than that. They watch you do things. They don't care what you say to them. And when lot of the people, when they have a semi success in their financial side, they say, I want to sit at home now and spend time with our children. That seems like a good goal, and it's a noble cause in their mind to spend time with their children. Now imagine what the children see. Children see that I go to school at 7:30 a.m. My dad is sitting on the sofa watching CNBC. I come home from school, my dad is sitting on the sofa watching CNBC, and the dad says, son, you need to work really, really hard. Hard work is what it takes to be successful. Go out and do more work. And he's sitting on the sofa watching CNBC. Guess what? Then instead, what if you say I want our children to focus on doing good for humanity, because we know if the children can stay focused on what can they do to improve the lives of people around them, whether it is thousands or millions of them, if they focus on that, not only they contribute to the society, they can also create an amazingly great enterprise or a career as an entrepreneur. But most of the parents are so, they're so risk averse that they don't want to do the same thing that they preach their children to do, right? And that is the one of the problem. Second thing is, a lot of the time, it's not the teacher are bad people. They are just not taught how do you go out and use the online education. So as opposed to really making them feel bad that you are a bad person, you don't want the children to be taught remotely, they need to be taught how to use technology, because many of these teachers, when they have been teaching the same way for the last 20, 30 years, they are not used to using the technology. In fact, their children are the one who set up their computer to make it work for them, right? So in fact, what happens is, when the children are smarter than the teacher in terms of the use of the technology, the teacher doesn't get the respect of the students that actually they can teach something, right? So it's all about understanding and respect that they have to develop against the student. So I really think teaching the teachers about the new set of technologies, making it easy that where teachers job is not to be an expert. Teachers job shouldn't be about know it all. In fact, in my opinion, the best thing a parent or a teacher does is, when a child asks a question, not to necessarily give all the answer because you think you know all the answer, to be able to say, I don't know. Let's look together and find out what the right answer is. Oh, that's a great question. Never thought of it this way. Let us Google and let's find out how this actually works. When child is curious, how do you think the plane flies, as opposed to blasting out the answer that you may be half baked. Let's say, let's learn about how plane flies, right? Or whatever that happens to be. Every single question, you can make it is a joint learning experience. And when you do that, everything from your child's perspective, they start to develop this self-confidence that it's okay not to have all the answers, because we are constantly telling them that they need to know it all, they need to have all the answers. And to me, creating that environment where the learning happens is because you say, I don't know, and you're curious about learning. And that's where I think the growth happens.
I couldn't agree with you more on that one. I mean, I often, even with my students, if they ask me a question, I don't know the answer to it, I'm very honest and say, I have no idea. Like, why don't you look it up and then teach me, or tell me about it? Or, sometimes when we're doing it in group, like the group mentoring that I've done, it's okay. Well, let's look it up together. Let's find that answer. Or what do you think? What do you think about it? And then you take all of those different possibilities and you put them together, and then everybody, you learn to understand and be appreciative of what is, if it's a fact, or how other people feel, if it's more of, if it could be more opinion based. And so with that being said, that's incredible. Now, as a father, as a parent, I mean, your children right now, I mean, you are an incredible example for your children, but as they were young, when they were little,
Yeah.
what was it that you did with them in raising them that made them, I mean, I know I'm sure you did certain things with them, but that made them so curious, because your children are also changing and doing life altering things right now in their work as well. So when you were raising your children, when they were growing up, what was it that you feel was helpful as a parent to motivate them to want to do those types of things and be curious as well?
I think that there are a couple of things here, Christy, that, one of the things is to redefine to them what success meant. And when they were young, we would tell them that your success is not going to be measured by how much money you have in the bank. It's going to be measured by how many lives you're able to improve while you're still alive, right? You People will know that you're truly successful when you become humble, because humility is a sign of success. Because the day you become arrogant is the day you realize that you still have something to prove to yourself or someone else. That means you're not successful yet, right? So humility becomes a sign of success. And your self-worth doesn't come from what you own. Your self-worth comes from what you create. That means if you inherit a lot of money, you're still a parasite on humanity, because you haven't contributed or created anything yourself. So to me, about teaching them about all these basic foundation of what success meant. And then, most parents would go read a bedtime story to the children. And I think we had this fun thing that I would do before bedtime. We would actually play this game where they would tell, and I would ask them, here are the four elements or four things, and I want you to tell me a story that connects them together. So idea would be, say, I said there is a monkey, there is an ocean, there is a tree, and there is a lion. Now tell me a story that connects all four of them together. And the reason we did that was because I wanted children to think that how the concept that are completely separate objects, how they can be connected together, because that gives them an ability to connect the facts that don't seem to be relevant to each other, but how you can connect these objects together and actually weave them into a single story. And this is basically building a new type of neural connections in their brain to start thinking about the world very differently than what they're used to. That means they always think about monkey and a tree, but they would never think about the monkey and an ocean, and how can you connect that. And that really was one of the games we will always play. And I think there are other ways of the things was to have them focus on, every time they will come back and say, oh, that just can't be done. I would stop them right there and say, what if it could be done? Now let's sit down and let's talk about, for this to be done, what is it that needs to happen that would actually make it happen, right? And we don't know whether it cannot be done. Don't worry about how, just focus on what, right? What needs to be done. Let's not worry about how it is going to be done, but what needs to happen for this problem to be solved. And then we can go drill down and say, what are the different ways of solving that problem? But let's just stay focused on what, because that gives them a basic understanding of how every problem can be solved. Just if you could do this, this problem can be solved. And then we can focus on how to do that, right? The other part that really I found to be fascinating with our children was, we will always say, don't look at the world what is, focus on what you want the world to be. That means don't worry about, is this glass half empty or half full, because that doesn't really matter. What matters is, do you want to fill this glass, and with what? Because if you want to fill the glass, then do you really care it is half empty or half full? And if you don't care to fill the glass, then you don't care whether it's half empty or half full. So that means you focus on what is it that you want the world to be, and then you take the world from here to where you want the world to be, rather than getting stuck with, well, it is half empty or is it half full.
Wow. That's, yeah. I mean, and it's so true. And I love the idea of not just reading the bedtime story, but creating the bedtime story with them, because and taking those different elements. That's incredible. I'd like to do that with my own students. I'm going to have to use that in my classroom. That would be amazing, amazing, amazing to hear what they can come up with. I know that a lot of times today, I know that you had mentioned where the idea of gamification and being helpful in school to go from one level to the next being a sort of evaluation system that is helpful as opposed to it being time bound. At the end of the school year you learn what you learn, and if you pass you pass, if you don't you don't, and whatever grade you get. And I like the idea, like it's like different levels. You pass that level in a video game, you go on to the next one. However, with parents right now, and I know there's a lot of struggle in that kids just want to be on video games. There's a lot of, kids and households and where, now that we're in that technological age, that video games and gaming systems are the focus of kids and not wanting to go outside or play or do other things. What do you say to parents who have difficulty motivating their children in other ways outside of just playing video games?
Well, first of all, we as parents have to fundamentally change ourselves, right? Which is that video games are not bad, right? So, in some sense, when the books or the newspapers first came out, our grandparents said, "Oh my God, that's the end of the world. No kid is going to go play outside because now they're reading the magazine, now they're reading the newspaper. God forbid they're now reading the book, right?" And now, so obviously, my point is every generation has challenges with the technology that came about. To me, our kids are more social than we ever were. I mean, the fact is, when I was young, maybe I connected with 2, 3, or 5 people who just happened to be in my neighborhood, and that was all my social life that was. Today, our children are connected to people around the country and hundreds of them, and they know much more intimate details about each one of their friends than we ever knew, because they're posting them on Snapchat, they're posting them on TikTok, and every one of our child, actually our cousins, everyone, they can tell me everything about what's happening in their life. So my point is, when we think our kids are not socially connected, we are wrong. They just connect differently than we did, right? So people used to meet in front each other. When the telephones came out, we start calling each other, and our parents said, "Oh my God, there goes the society. People cannot talk to each other because now they're on the phone all the time." My point is, there is nothing new here. In fact, I would tell you that when my oldest was young, when he was 2.5, 3 years old, I would buy them his educational CD-ROM games. He used to want to play video game. So I bought them the Math Blaster, which was basically a Space Invader game. But to actually load the weapons, he had to solve the problem. So he learned all of his math. When he was, by the time he was 3.5, he was doing algebra. He was doing mathematics of whether it's a division or multiplication, because that's the only way he could play the video game. I bought him the Reading Rabbit and the Writing Rabbit, and he learned all the lessons from these video games because it gave him the motivation to go to the next level. And you have to learn to read before you can get to the next level, right? So my point is, there is nothing wrong. In fact, there is a lot of study done that shows that actually the video games are best neurological tool. In fact, the first person shooting game makes not only the children's peripheral vision much better. I can tell you myself, I don't play video games. And when I sit down with the children trying to play video game, I'm always like, "Can you tell me what it says up on the top of the screen?" Because I cannot see. Our peripheral vision as adults has actually limited, versus the child, they can see the whole screen and they can see all the things that are happening on the side. Their decision-making power, it starts to improve, and they develop the intuitive sense of when to shoot and when something is going to pop up. They start to develop these skills that we never did. So our executive decision making gets better and better by playing video games. And there's a lot of science that actually now shows that actually these are not the bad games. So we should be thinking about how the media is, as long as they are connecting with people And I'm not suggesting that you cut out meeting with physical, in a physical sense. I'm saying is that, but don't think that this is bad. It is one part of their life, how they connect with other children who may not be in their neighborhood. And yes, they should still go out and meet other children. Yes, they need to still learn to socialize. Yes, they do still need to meet physically and get to know each other. So yes, answer to the other is yes.
Very interesting. No, I love that because it is such a debated topic. It
Yeah.
is very much, should we do it? Should we not do it? Should kids be? Should it not? Should it be 30 minutes? Should it be an hour? Should it be 2 hours? And I think with everything, everything in moderation, right? Like, I mean, as long as they're still being physically active, because that's also an important part of overall in general health.
But
So
Christy, I mean, they will, our kids. I don't know nowadays, but in my younger, when they were young, they used to have this called guitar something, and
Guitar
they would be
Hero.
jumping. Yeah, there you go. They would jump on the things
Yep.
and trampoline, and they would be doing all kinds of physical activities. I
Mhm.
mean, they literally were playing tennis on the video game. They were doing all kinds of physical activities. I mean, those are better than most people do now.
I agree with you 100%. I used to have a Wii and I loved the
Yeah,
Wii. I
yeah,
loved like you're going bowling, you're moving
yeah,
around,
yeah.
the dance revolution and all of that stuff.
Dance Revolution. That's what I meant. Yeah, Dance Revolution.
Yes,
That was
that
awesome.
it was. I have to agree with you 100% there. So, when you look at what kids today are graduating with in their skills and capabilities, either from high school or from college or university, and they're going into the workforce, what do you feel is it that in general or research showing that most young people are lacking
I
in entering the workforce?
there's several things. The creativity is out the window. The creativity and curiosity is the one that is getting killed the most in the school, our school system. In fact, this is really interesting. When we hire people from Harvard Business School, it takes me 4 years to make them unlearn everything that they learned in the business school, because in a business school they taught about spreadsheets, that you build a model for the spreadsheet. And I keep telling them that, remember, there are so many unknowns in this world. Every single time there is an unknown, you have to make an assumption. And guess what happens? If you already believe something is not going to work, you make the assumption that low number. What does the spreadsheet tell you? Exactly what you already know, that your assumptions are going to be lower because you don't believe it is going to work. When you believe something is going to work, your assumptions make it higher number, that a spreadsheet tells you exactly what you already know. So learn to listen to your intuitive voice and forget about all these spreadsheets. And I still remember I hired this guy and I told him, let's go buy this company. And he comes up with this whole spreadsheet, why it makes no sense. And I told him, let me show you something. This is a very simple math. I'm telling you, this business will allow us to get a foothold into a new industry that we know nothing about. And that is all we really need out of this. Forget all these numbers, right? And that became one of our best acquisition. And we ended up actually building a whole new business around it. The only reason I mentioned that is that people lose touch because we are now taught everything is about thinking. Tell me the zeros and ones. And I find that I am such a big believer in this intuition. In fact, some of the best decisions I have ever made, every time I have to make a tough decision that is the life altering decision, all I do is close my eyes and I want to feel, how do I feel having made that decision? I'm now a year later, 5 years later, how am I feeling having made that decision? And then sometimes I just walk away from it and people look at me, it's like, what do you mean you don't want to do it? I say, it just doesn't feel good. And that's it. It doesn't feel good. I'm not going to do it. Right. And I think learning to have that intuitive sense is something that can't be, in schools. In fact, think it's like a voodoo or a woo-woo thing, right?
Mhm.
Answer is that it's not a voodoo or woo-woo thing. That is where the magic happens. Teaching children that there are many, many ways of solving a problem. There are many acceptable answers. And having people who are non-expert in your field listening to their dumb question that you think are dumb would allow you to actually solve the problem in a way that you may have never even thought about it. So to me, bringing this naivety, bringing that, hey, what if this could be done, allows you to look at the problem differently, allows you to ask the questions which are very different questions than anyone else in the industry has ever asked.
Yes, absolutely. I couldn't agree more in that sense. Oftentimes a lot of people, or a lot of things that I've done, how do you tell, especially when you have, family or friends who think in a traditional sense that I have a feeling, like, why are you doing it? I have a feeling, and they're just like, what, is, are you crazy? I'm like, no, but this is how I feel like. And even with you, one of the things that you said before is your gut is very intuitive, and that's where you all of these things that you're doing right now comes into play in your gut. So one of the things that I feel is I'd like to just kind of, for those listening and those watching, you came from India. You grew up. How old were you when you came to the United States?
About 22, about 38 years ago.
Okay, yeah. So you are 22 years old. So you grew up in India, humble means, and it was, so the one thing that I feel is really important for young people to understand when they're talking about success or thinking of success in this way is that, you know, learning that story, that journey of how people got to where they are today, because like social media, where it's a wonderful thing and connects so many people, it's also something that, if you don't look into the background or into the history of how people got to where they are today, there's that idea that it's like instant gratification, right? And so will you share a little bit of your journey from
Yeah.
where you came from to who you are today?
But Christy, I mean, if you look at any first-time entrepreneur, there is a story of a person who struggled for years and years and decades, right? You can pick literally any name. I am just no exception here. Howard Schultz, right?
Mhm.
Grew up in the poor neighborhood in New York. Every single venture capitalist told him that you're crazy building this coffee shop. Nobody would ever do that, right? Point is, you can literally go down, pick an, you any entrepreneur, they would tell you that they all grew up with humble beginnings. Everyone thought what they were going to do was a crazy idea,
Mhm.
right? Spanx was a crazy idea. I mean, if you go through every single of these inventions that has come about, made these people super successful, they were all crazy ideas, right? Whether it's Facebook, I mean, literally rating girls, right? I mean, were hot or
Mhm.
not, right? I mean, all these
Right.
things were, right, were all crazy ideas. And so to me, that it doesn't matter where you come from.
Mhm.
You cannot blame just because you grew up poor that your destiny is predetermined to be poor. As a matter of fact, it is easier for you to succeed because you have that hunger and a desire to go out and do something. The trickiest part actually is raising children in an affluent family where they children know they don't need to work for a living and they still do. And that's the harder parenting lesson than actually teaching a children when you know you're growing up in a humble family to be able to go out and go do something amazing, because that's expected of them. That is what I would call a basic survival instinct, that you
Mhm.
have to go out there and do that, right? And so I mean, for me it was a story. I came to United States with $5, didn't speak the language, and God has been kind to us, right? And with that kindness, I focus on doing things that could improve the lives of billions of people. The fact we are having this conversation, I mean, I'm going to share a story, Christy, that I hope it doesn't embarrass you, right? To me, when people say it's all about who you know, Fortunately, you, this generation is the luckiest generation because you know everyone. You can literally reach out to anyone you know. I did not know Christy. It was simply a message from Christy, a simple, what I say, cold, a message to me on a social media and saying, "Hey, I'm doing this. I would be interested to talk to you about something." And it so happens we had a conversation, and interestingly, she had everything planned what she may or may not have wanted to say. I simply say, "What can I do to help you?" And she froze. Right.
Mhm.
And the point was, that is the thing, that we can connect with anybody, but the question you have to ask yourself is, then what? Then what would you do with that? What are your plans? How do you plan to engage and use that? And you and I have obviously gone through to know each other over the last few months now, and the fact we're talking here, it tells you that you and I have no reason, we have never met, and there's no reason we would ever even met in a physical world. But the social media allows us to connect with anyone we want. So this idea of "I don't know people" is simply a excuse they give themselves not to go out and make themselves vulnerable. What
Mhm.
you really need to succeed in life is to be vulnerable. Ask for help, reach out and ask for help. And when someone does connect, no, don't ask for people for money. Let me just say the secret. I'm going to tell you that.
Mhm.
The minute you ask people for money, there's 99.9999% chance they're going to actually not only say no, you have now burned that relationship forever.
Mhm.
If you reach out and ask people to help you do the good in the world, and you're simply a conduit to doing that, it's a very rarely somebody who's going to say, "You know what, I just am not interested in helping anyone," period. Right? More often than not, if they say no, it is because the timing is not good and they're busy, and they may come back and you can reach out to them 6 months later, and when the timing will be better. But to me, the thing is to always stay focused on doing good in the world, and ask people for help to help you do good in the world. Because when you do that, you can create a business around doing good in that world.
Mhm. Absolutely. And it's interesting that you mentioned that, because, and I'm not embarrassed at all. I actually used that as a teachable moment yesterday, that exact same story, when one of the parents of the three young boys come on, and they're like, "How do you know Naveen Jain?" And I said, "Well, I merely just reached out to him and he responded to me." And I told the story of, and he said, "How can I help you?" And I froze. And I said that to them. And I used it as a teachable moment for this young boy, who is actually on here listening right now. And I said, "Know what it is of how that you want that person to help." But again, like you said, it's not so much, you don't ask for money. Like, in this point, and it's not that I didn't, that's not what I wanted. I wanted for you to interview you. I wanted you to be a part of what I was doing. I wanted to learn from you more so. And that's why, one of the things why I keep always coming back to you, because every time I I may not have known what I didn't know what I necessarily wanted at that moment, but I guess now I just wanted to learn from you, and grow from you. And you had something to tell me that I just maybe was not ready to hear. And now, hearing you and listening to you, and constantly, reading your book, and seeing what you say, and the good that you do for others, you're an example to so many. But the other thing is that you are very down to earth. You, if you can help, you help someone, because, like you just said, without what you where you when you grew up is much more difficult than right now. And that connection, in the just whatever it was, that even for you to say, "Yes, Christy, I would like to speak to you, to talk to you, whatever, to interview with the young girl that we had interviewed with," all of that, it's merely just a message away. Some people are going to say no, some people are going to say yes, but I use that often. And that maybe was what I needed to learn from you, right? I needed to learn that I need to be ready, in the sense of what if someone says to you, how can I help? Because I just feel that but you have helped in so many ways beyond you necessarily knowing what you have helped me with. And
But so
that
Christy,
is,
I'm going to tell you another story. Is this the lesson that you're just talking about? Actually, I learned from our son. So let me tell you the actual story of how it happened. That how my son taught me about how when you meet someone, what do you do? So, Bill Gates every year hosts a CEO summit, and I was there at one of the CEO summit, and I took my son, who was at that time 15 years old. I've always been taking him to the event with me when he was 10 years old. And at the event was Ratan Tata. Ratan Tata, if you are an Indian, you probably know he is the legend. I mean, Mr. Tata is the legend in the country, right? Here he is in person. Everyone who goes meets with him would first thing would say, Mr. Tata, it's so good to meet with you. I used to work for you. My dad used to work for you. My uncle used to work for you. And he would say, thank you, thank you, thank you. And basically everybody just walks away. My son walks up to him, not knowing who he is, and he said, Mr. Tata, I have a organization that I help young students and young entrepreneurs actually bring mentor to them, similar to what my dad did for me. And I want to bring that mentorship to all these students. Would you have 15 minutes of your time to help me think through, and would you be able to speak to these events? And his answer was, oh, I'm going to be busy until 9 o'clock. Would you come back at 9:15 and let's meet us in the lobby? And I want to help you. And I am like, you mean you're going to meet with Mr. Tata by himself alone talking about this? Did you ask him? And I said, no, I told him I used to work for you. And he said, then what do you expect him to say?
oh my gosh, that's incredible. Wow. Wow. I mean, learning things from your children is, I guess, eye opening. And that was your son that did that?
Yeah.
Now, how many children do you have? You have 3 children. So is
Yes,
that your,
Christian.
because I know one of your children right now is working in like housing in
Oh, so
development.
I have 3 children. My oldest one actually has 3 companies. One of them is an apartment where essentially finding a way to get the students who graduate to be able to get into an apartment, because you don't have a security deposit, first month rent, last month rent, security deposit. So he came up with a concept where you pay $5 a month and you actually don't have to put a deposit, or if you have a deposit, you get it back so you can use it for other purposes, right? And then in fact, he just launched last week a new company where you are able to take a credit card and pay your rent, and your landlord gets a full money, and you can put on the credit card, earn the points, and you can use the points actually as a down payment towards home, right? That's our oldest one, focusing on affordable housing. Our daughter started a women's health company called EVVY, and she, in the first company she did, was working with an amazingly great woman on using AI to remove the gender bias. She focuses on women's issues, and now she started a women's health company looking at the vaginal microbiome to get rid of all of the women's related health issues. And our youngest, so she also graduated from Stanford, and she was Stanford STEM fellow, Stanford Mayfield fellow, and then this is what she's doing now. And this company, by the way, is unbelievable. She is 25 years old. She said, Dad, there are 25 VCs who have sent her a term sheet. And now yesterday she called me and just telling you the story. I hope she's not listening to it. And she said, Dad, I signed a term sheet with one of the top venture capitalists. And another person called me and is now screaming at me and saying, it's a small industry. If you don't take money from me, I'm going to destroy you. Dad, what do I do? What do I do? And I said, look, I have no choice. I already signed it. And I'm really happy with the thing. And he said, no, you sell me your shares. And I said, sweetie, don't let someone bully you. You tell him that, there's going to be a time, if you want to be an investor, you need to think of it as a long term. This is first of many opportunities you're going to get in the company. But if you behave like this will be the last time you'll be speaking to me. So don't ever speak to any woman or anyone like this again. And make sure that he understands that, because you're not going to get bullied into selling your shares just because he wants to invest in your company, right? But my point I'm trying to make is that, here is the thing, that she should be happy that she got an amazing valuation from the top VC. And now she's calling me and crying and said, Dad, what do I do? Because this person is going to, unless I take his money, they're going to destroy me. It's like, really? I mean, that's
Wow.
basically complete bullying, right? And
Right.
just thinking, yeah. And so, point I'm trying to make is that our youngest one, by the way, is went to Stanford, became a Schwarzman scholar, and now he's working in a fintech company. And I told him, learn from a great entrepreneurs about how do you build businesses there before you go out and do on your own, right? And our daughter did the same thing, worked with a great entrepreneur, learned everything about how to build a business before she started on her own. So to me, I'm just so proud that all of them are going out and doing things that are going to fundamentally improve people's lives. And that is the way to build great businesses.
Wow. Wow. And then they have you as their father, and you ultimately say go out and work with a great entrepreneur, and you are one of the best, and you tell them to go out and work with somebody else. I mean, I guess because they've been working with you their whole life. So, in
Actually, no, I really feel that, parent, parents can only teach so much. At the
Mhm,
end of the day, they need to learn the same thing from someone else. And I can give you stories after stories
mhm,
where the children obviously want to make you proud. There's just no two ways about it. And I think, Christy, you and I talked about that. When our children were young, and even now, we tell them very clearly that our love for you is unconditional, but our approval is not. And what that really means is you never have to wonder, do we love you? But I'm not going to approve of the things that do not align with our value system. So if you
mhm,
go out and do things that are simply to make money, I'm not going to tell you I'm proud of you. I'm going to only tell you I'm proud of you when you say, Dad, I'm going to improve the lives of 3 billion women in this world. I am proud of you, right? That aligns with our values. So children do things that actually you teach them what will make you proud of them. But the end of the day, when it comes to life lessons, the children are more likely to tell you that those were your times, those were your days, right? But they would listen to the same thing from other adults. So there are a lot of times I would actually, when we need to deliver a message, I will have someone that they respect, have them talk to them and say, uncle, let me talk about life, right? Because I remember my oldest son, and when he was going to go to college, and said, Dad, I'm just so excited about going to college. And say, why? He said, college is so much fun, right?
mhm.
And oh my God, I'm like thinking, oh my God, this is this is happening. This is happening. So I had one of our friend, Admiral, who has been in obviously the vice chairman of Joint Chief of Staff, Admiral Bill Owens, and I say, Admiral, I need your help. And Admiral sits Uncle down, my oldest son, and he says, you want to talk about fun? Let me tell you about the fun. When you are in the war, taking care of this country that gives you this education, when an 18-year-old kid who is under my command dies, I have to hold that kid in my arms and take it to the parent and tell them why your kid died. Why your kid died is because so others in this country can be free and have education and go to college like you're going. Now, if you think that is fun, go out and have fun, right? And he said the people who died for you to go to college, so don't waste their life on it. I mean, that's a powerful lesson, right?
Wow. I mean, I guess that's one way to put it. Yeah, I mean, that's that is a powerful lesson.
Yeah,
Wow. Yeah. I mean, and those are those things that a lot of people take for granted that we don't
yeah,
necessarily think about on a day-to-day basis. I often tell people, cuz after living in the Dominican Republic for the last 8
yeah,
years, having the ability to just turn on your water, your tap water, and have the ability to just drink it if you want to, then that's something that we don't necessarily think about because it's
that's right.
something that we have on a daily basis. And so yeah, that's definitely a very powerful lesson. So
So,
in
Christy, as we wrap up here, we have last 5 minutes. Let's make the
yes,
best of it. Yeah.
I was just about to say, in closing, then, what would you, oh gosh, what do you say or what do you think about the idea of kids in going into higher education? And do you feel with entrepreneurship, and if young people in high school were to learn and have that ability to learn well entrepreneurship, would they necessarily have to go to college or university to, if they don't want to specialize in something?
I'm going to say something that is going to probably get me in trouble. So I am I am a firm believer in education.
Hmm.
I believe it doesn't matter, even if you want to be an entrepreneur, finish your education. Opportunities will always be there. If it's not this, it'll be something else. For every Bill Gates who dropped out of college and became successful, I can tell you 99% others who are still digging roads because they couldn't get any other but minimum wage job. So your odds are in your favor when you have a foundation of learning, the foundation of knowledge, which is what I call a basically your plan B. This is your safety net. It's okay to be an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurship is like a high wire act. When you're walking on that tight high wire, you better have a damn safety net underneath you, because you will fall one day, and if there is no safety net, you die. And that's the reason that even the most experienced high wire acts are always have a safety net under them. So education is your safety net. Never, ever, ever underestimate it. The knowledge you learn in college is not just the skills, is about interacting with the fellow human beings, where you have a lot of free time to be able to do some soul searching that you will never do in your life. So before you go out and become an entrepreneur and start to focus on every single day quarterly problems or earnings or profits and things like that, become a great human being. Get to explore your soul. Find your true obsession of what you want to do in this world. What is it, a problem that you're willing to die for and then live for it? What is it that you will wake up and jump out of the bed every single morning? And once you find that, that is the time you start a company, and after you finish your education. So to me, not doing education is never, never the answer.
Hmm. Yes, I mean, I do agree with you in that sense. I don't. For me, undergraduate and college was that experiential. There are a lot of things that I was introduced to that I never knew about. However, on the other side of the spectrum is also, the ability to receive that education for a lot of people that is at an affordable way of doing it. And I think that really is the difficult part of the higher education system, at least in the United States, is the fact that the cost of the
But it's
education.
changing. I mean, look, you see all the Harvard courses, all the MIT courses, you can get them on edX for free, right? So many of these courses for learning are all available to you for you to be able to learn from. To me, the education is around giving you the broad perspective, giving you lots and lots of dots that you know about. So someday when you see a new dot, you can see how all these different dots are connected to each other. So to me, whether you do an online learning, whether you go to a college, I'm not suggesting that everyone goes to Harvard, but the point is you want to be able to go and take the Harvard course. I am not a big believer that you have to get a certificate from Harvard, but
Hmm.
always have the knowledge that the courses would deliver to you.
Right. And I definitely I agree with that. Like, it might not necessarily be the degree from Harvard
Yeah,
or whatever. And
yeah,
I think that's for everybody, because I think I remember you were saying one time, the whole point being that, you go and you're told to study, go through college, then go to university, and then all of a sudden it's like everybody stops learning. Right. And I
yeah,
remember you mentioning that once, and it's like, you have to be a lifelong learner. There's
yeah.
so many things to take in and learn. And so I just want to say thank you so much.
Thank you, Christy. I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate what you're doing for the children. And I really appreciate your kind heart that you have to giving your time and to these students and making sure that they succeed. So thank you very much. And everyone who's listening to it, please just know that lots of people like Christy support them, because these
Mhm.
are the people who are making a difference in other people's lives. So thank you, Christy, for what you stand for.